Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Yes and Ask Me, a show based out of Bexar Stage here in San Antonio, Texas, where I get to interview some of the most amazing and awesome improv players here in the San Antonio improv community. Today's episode is about show creation in the world of improv. And I have some fantastic panel members for you today. So my first panel member is Tina Jackson. Tina, would you join us, please?
Howdy.
Howdy, Tina. Tina, you're my middle square. I can always depend on you. Tina, for those folks that have never seen one of our shows before, I want to highlight some stuff about you, primarily the fact that you've been doing improv for 20 years now.
That's
Big
right.
2-0. Yeah, you are also the owner and operator of Bexar Stage Theater here in San Antonio.
Yes. I
Excellent.
can't get away from it, even if I tried.
Now, my guess, and I don't want to go into a whole bunch of detail right now, but my guess is that you have plenty of experience, not just as a performer in shows, but probably also as a producer.
I do. I have been producing shows way before I had a theater. I ran a production company in Chicago called Big Little Comedy, which eventually ended up producing things like the Big Little Comedy Fest, which we've maintained since being in San Antonio. But producing shows has been a thing that I've done since probably 2008 or so, at least 2009.
Okay, well, we're going to pick your brain in a second. I'm going to go ahead and introduce my next panel members.
Can't wait.
I want to introduce Roy Janik. Roy, would you please join us? Hey,
Hello.
Roy, could you give us some a little bit of background as to how long you've been doing improv and what city and theater you're based out of?
Yeah, first I want to say howdy to everyone out there in Twitch. My name is Roy Janik. I am one of the owners and the artistic director of the Hideout Theater in Austin. I've been doing improv since 2005, so only 15 plus years.
Only 15, okay.
Only 15.
Compared to Tina.
Still learning.
And I'm also part of a 4-person improv troupe called Parallelogram of Phonograph, or PGRAPH for short.
Fantastic. All right. I can see that we have another theater owner here, so we're going to get some fantastic experience stories here. My next guest is Clint Taylor. Clint, would you please join us?
Greetings, everyone.
Howdy, Clint.
Howdy, Clint.
Clint, can you give us a little bit of background as to how long you've been doing improv?
Yeah, I'm a baby. I've been doing improv 2 years and producing shows for maybe a year.
At least.
Amazing.
Least. You started producing shows as a level 3 student.
Yeah.
I've actually seen a lot of the shows that Clint has produced. And by the way, I'm also an improv baby. I think I've been doing improv for just about a year and a half now. So we're going to get some good levels of perspective here. Now, Tina, I want to start with you. Everybody who's watching knows that improv is completely improvised. So when we talk about a show, what do we mean by this? How do you produce a show if the whole thing is improvised?
Producing a show is really exciting, yeah, because you get to sort of set a little bit more of a framework than you would in your normal team or troupe show. Is to pick a concept or a genre or a sort of a base model from a movie you like or a play or an author or something where you're picking sort of a set of rules that all of your shows are going to apply to and adhere to, right? You're working some of the shows that we've created at Bexar Stage, like one of our favorite ones is an improvised horror movie that takes place at camp, right? So we call that Camp Slaughter, and all the rules are it always takes place at camp. There's always a killer in the woods, so or not necessarily in the woods, but like there's always a killer. We're gonna definitely see murders happen. We're gonna set up some of these like narrative sort of structures at the top to help establish those characters before we get into the murder plot and stuff of that nature. So it's about setting up sort of kind of a show Bible that's just like, here's how our show operates. And then from within that, we get the suggestion from the audience, and we're able to adhere to both the suggestion and this sort of Bible of rules that all of our characters and heroes apply to.
Okay, Roy, is that how you approach any of your productions too? Creating those set of rules and then applying them to, I guess, the show as the sequence continues?
Yeah, I think that's basically it. Although we don't think of it in terms of rules. It's more, I mean, although that it can absolutely be the case depending on what the show is. It's mostly, it comes from a place of there's a concept that I'm really inspired to do, be it improvised 1960s Batman or Chekhov or a horror musical. And then the director and the producers basically and the cast will do a deep dive into the genre, and then you kind of start putting some of those ideas on their feet, and you're like, what does this show want to be in terms of like structure, and even more than structure, the most important thing that when we start a show like this is tone. Basically, like, what's the feel of the world and what type of characters might exist in that world and how do they talk, and whether or not those translate into rules. I mean, they absolutely would, because if you're set in the 1800s and someone starts talking about like iPhones or the internet, it breaks the reality of the world that you're trying to create. So yeah, I guess so. I just talked myself into saying that's how we do things.
Short answer, yes.
Can you throw out an example? You threw out several, but can you pick one show and just describe it to us?
Yeah, I'll talk about, because Tina talking about Camp Slaughter made me think about it. One of the shows that I co-directed in the not too distant past called Death by Musical, and it was an improvised comedy horror musical. And I directed that with Margaret Hunsicker, who's an Austin improviser who just moved to Chicago. And we both have a very similar sensibility when we make shows happen, which is that we don't care about it looking pristine. We like for the audience to see kind of behind the curtain. So the idea was for the show to be like as loose as possible, and to also attempt something really hard, which would be doing this musical narrative that is also a horror show. And but what that translated into is that, like, if a character transformed into a creature or something like that, they wouldn't go backstage. The makeup artist would come on stage and, like, in the moment paint their face. I mean, not always, but that was always what I was going for.
So
I was like, let's see that. And then we had two narrators who would basically control the action, and oftentimes what that meant was just kind of indulging their whims and pushing the cast a little bit to try hard stuff that they wouldn't necessarily try musically. I think in the UK they call that role an agitator.
And I think it fits as an agitator. That's so funny. Okay, that's great.
Yeah, so that was a show that I was really happy with and delighted by, and also radically different from some other shows that I've directed that have the entire opposite goal.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so Clint, one thing that I noticed about some of the shows that you produce is that you like to incorporate improvisers of different levels, kind of like in a jam style of format. Can you describe to us one of those shows and why you like doing that?
Yeah, the show that most incorporates different levels deliberately is Cupid's Arrow. Cupid's Arrow is the concept is these are all improvisers that I have a crush on, but rather than being the lover in that relationship, I'm Cupid in that relationship, and I draw different improvisers together. And so, yeah, one of the goals is to both highlight upcoming improvisers, young improvisers, and also give them experience with more experienced improvisers. And so, yeah, that's one of the meta concepts. And also just something that is good for the community to cross those levels and bring everybody together.
Yeah. I like that.
That's the reason for it, though. It's not really for show quality or anything like that.
But show quality exists because it has to, right?
Yeah.
So one of the questions from Twitch right now is, how do you know if your idea is overproduced? So as producers, does that concept make sense to you? The concept of overproducing something?
Sure, you can totally. One of the things we caution against is overthinking a concept, right? The simpler, the better in a lot of ways, where it comes to letting the improvisers that you choose in your, whether it's a cast or whether it's a team of people that are producing a show together, whatever it is, to make sure that the improvisers have a degree of freedom within it, because the reason you chose them is not because you want them to recite a script. You want them to find some freedom within it to find and explore some stuff, right? So if I said that Camp Slaughter always had to be a monster with a motive, and there always is a final girl who slays the beast by discovering her secret strength, is if I overproduce it, if I say all of these rules or guidelines or tropes have to come into play at all times, I'm stifling the creativity of the improvisers who I've chosen as my cast. So I think when you're to caution against overproducing is to loosen up some of those guidelines and say, here are some ideas that might come into play. You might have a monster. You might have a final girl, right? That final girl might be the virgin who denied sex in the first scene, because that's a trope of horror movies. So like throwing out ideas or suggestions or things that might work. Let's try this. Let's see how it works in a rehearsal setting, are different than saying it has to happen this way. And after this scene, there's always this scene where we decipher what the code of it means and how this is, after the second murder, we're going to decide who is going to live to the very end or what happened,
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I feel like you want just enough structure and no more, basically, in your show. And you can overproduce your show in other ways too. Like we have fantastic technical improvisers in Hideout and in the Austin, and they've elevated our shows so much. But if we go too far in one direction to where the improvisers feel hampered by what they can do, like, for instance, like if you have to, it's like, if you're going to be the villain, you've got to wear the blue coat, and this is a made up example, and you've got to go find that coat instead of just like running on stage and declaring yourself. Then you start to like lose the rhythm of the show. Or if you feel like, things have to resolve a certain way, or we always open with this type of song, and if you do something else if you do that type of song later, then you've made a mistake. It's basically anything where that joy of discovery is taken away. But the thing that's a good way to say it. Flip side of that I've learned is that you still want that enough structure part, and you definitely want to take advantage of the tech team that's up in the booth making your show happen, and the costume designers. But you want to do it in a way that's true to the vision of the show, and you also want to allow for certain restrictions. But everyone needs to be super clear that that's what's going to happen. Like I already mentioned it once, but we did a show years ago called Holy 1960s Batman, which was literally an improvised episode of the 1960s Batman. And when we watched the source material, the first 15 minutes of every episode was exactly 100% the same. Like we had like a villain sting, and then we would kind of cut to like the mayor and the police chief like confused about it, and then they would call the phone, and then Batman and Robin would show up, and like we were like, if we're going to be true to this genre, we got to just lean into it. So the first 15 minutes of our show was the most structured bit of improv ever, but then we would just cut loose, and the rest of the show we could do whatever we wanted.
How did you feel the audience responded to that structure? Because my perception is for this question is like the more structure it is, the more produced it is, the less the audience feels it's improvised, and they come for the improvised. And I know that sometimes when shows are so good, it pulls audiences away because they're like, that wasn't really improvised.
I have so many thoughts about this. I'll try to narrow it down.
I love this so much.
One is, this comes from Keith Johnstone, who kind of originally formed the basis of what we teach at the Hideout. We've since grown into our own thing, but he still informs a lot of what we do. And he was basically like, you're never going to convince someone that your show was improvised. He's like, if they are skeptical, they're going to leave skeptical. So just don't even bother trying. I still explain to the audience at the top that everything is 100% improvised. I explain to the audience what improv is every single time I host a show. But then I stop caring if they believe it or not. And as I think as long, all right, we only have 30 minutes, right? But okay, I once read a blog post by Bill Arnett, fantastic guy.
Perfect, best guy.
So great. And he related some concept that he had heard from somewhere else. But it was the idea that we've all done twice as many shows as we think we have. There's a show you're trying to do, be it improvised Batman or Chekhov or the Herald or the Ewing or whatever. And there's the show of a bunch of people on stage having a good time. And you can choose which show to emphasize and to prioritize, but both shows still exist. So for instance, Improv Theater out of LA, they do amazing genre work, but they're so committed to it looking scripted that if someone starts laughing, they'll turn their head behind them and like hide their laughter from the stage. I only saw them do that once. Other times they cracked up. So but I've seen them do that. And but another show, there might barely be any scene work in it because it's a duo and they're flying high and they're just messing with each other the whole time. And it's still a hilarious show. So for even with a show with a lot of structure up top like Batman, as long as the performers on stage are obviously present and happy to be there and enjoying, reveling in how like formulaic and predictable it is, the audience will be right there along with them on the ride. But the moment it looks like the performers on stage are like, we got to slog through this structure, it's what we have to do, I would much rather do something else, but here I am, then that's when the audience will check out and be like, this is stupid. I came here for improv and you don't even want to be on stage, you know? Yeah. We call that at the Hideout the second show. And it actually is a big part of how we come up with shows in the first place. So like improvised Chekhov, there was no second show. If you laughed, your character was laughing. And we would just try to reintegrate all that stuff. Death by Musical, second show the entire time. Yeah.
Huh. That's so interesting. I haven't thought about that before, but I like that idea a lot.
It's a less... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please.
It's a less judgy way of talking about going meta, because when people say, oh, they went meta, they ruined it. It's like, if you think of the two shows, you can kind of train yourself to pop in and out of them. And it's not like it's part of the show that you're doing. It's just how much you choose to emphasize it, basically.
Oh, fascinating. Okay, so Clint, being in the early part of your improv career, I got to watch and be a part of your Christmas show just a few months ago.
Oh yeah.
Because I know your brain is always working and tinkering this kind of stuff. What I'd like to know is, what have you not tried yet in a show that you're really excited to try?
Oh shit, that's a great question.
I love this question.
I gotta think about that for me.
Man, let's have one of the people that love the question go first.
I just talked a bunch. I have an answer, but I want to defer to someone else.
Well, Clint, let me ask you this: the Christmas show, did it go exactly as you intended it on day one? When you first had the concept and outlined the whole thing, was your final product exactly like your initial vision?
No. In a lot of ways, yeah. In a lot of ways, no. Part of that was, one, handing over the very scripted thing to Tina and having her give her feedback, which was very good.
You have to say that. I'm right here.
No, I mean, it's still true, though. I mean, more eyes is still always better, regardless if they're a great improviser or it's just more eyes. But, for example, one of the things was, like, I wanted the audience to give us, okay, background, we put Christmas characters on trial. That's the thesis of the show.
The thesis of the show is we took
no more
Christmas characters and we put them on trial for Christmas crimes.
At first, I wanted the audience to tell us what Christmas character we are going to try, and then the defense and the prosecutor has to come up with the case immediately and then go for it. For sellability, Tina said we should, instead of get the suggestion, we should just tell the audience a week ahead of time, we're going to try the Grinch this week, or we're going to try Santa this week.
Yeah, I think there's a marketing angle to it that's like, oh, I definitely want to see the Grinch involved, you know, and it gives us the ability to then put Andrew in full green makeup and put a costume on it. You know, instead of having all of those things handy in case someone says the Grinch, you know, it gives us the production value of being able to say, you know what, the Grinch is going on trial. We're not going to tell you who the witnesses are, but we are going to improvise the whole thing. And
I would just like to say Tina was correct.
I
gave good advice.
To answer your question, I don't have anything right now. And part of that is because I'm very lucky to be in a young improvising community. So that like anytime I have an idea,
I'm like, yeah, let's put it up.
I get to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's generally at least pretty well thought out, right? Sometimes, like, I think there's in that concept that you just illustrated, right? That you were like, we're gonna get a suggestion of a Christmas character from the audience, and that feels like an idea that's maybe a little underproduced, right? So we add the element of we're gonna know which character is gonna be on trial, but we're not gonna tell them how, like, what's going to come at them evidence wise, because we're not going to tell the people who are the witnesses in the case what to say about them. We're just going to say, hey, if you're Cindy Lou Who and you're going up against the Grinch, like, what is Cindy Lou Who's complaints about the Grinch? Or is she in his favor? Or is, like, who, like, what side is she on right now? And we let the characters, as they were cast, decide sort of how they'd like to respond to the Grinch, which made it sort of like a mid-level production of like, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if the audience is going to buy this or not. This evidence that we're making up and from the base material. So that was an idea that it verged, I think, on overproduction just because there were so many elements to it. And there was not as much freedom as something like a Camp Slaughter where we're like, improvised horror movie, broad genre.
And I would think the things that looking back on the show, the things that we liked the least and that we took notes on and say, we're not going to do this again in the future for a similar show, were the things that were overproduced and very scripted.
Agreed. Where there were a couple bits where you're like, oh, this will kill. And when it didn't, we were like, oh, it's because we overthought it. It's because we pushed too hard for things like evidence. It's like, oh, well, if we don't have hard evidence, skip it.
So I find that super scary because even when you have a completely workshopped idea and you're ready to put that on the stage, there's a big jump between the idea in your head and what actually plays out on that stage. How do you bridge that gap? How do you know? How are you so certain that your concept is going to succeed and that the audience is going to like it?
Well, you should never be certain of anything.
Never.
And the other thing that's cool about improv is that it works better with an audience. So normally you rehearse the show a bunch and then you put it up on its feet opening night and it's 10 times better than it has been in rehearsal. So you get that bump of like adrenaline. And also this is why I was talking earlier about how it actually is important that the director be able to like put their foot down and make hard choices about aspects of the show that are important to doing the genre. Because they then can make that decision and be like, that dance routine intro we have did not work and the audience was just waiting for the show to start. I'm cutting it. We're not doing it anymore. And everyone's like, cool. As opposed to like, everyone debating it or like it may still happen. Or just like, you know what, the main character has to always like everyone or the audience isn't going to like them. So from now on, only positive characters, like putting your foot down and you're limiting things, but you're setting up the show that you envisioned, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the rules. Those are the rules that we talked about earlier.
Right. The guidelines of the show, sort of like, here's how the show operates.
So one of the questions out of Twitch is, so talking about the Christmas show, but a generic example is, do you ever put a plant in the audience to steer the show where you want it to go? And as an improviser, I'm going to come right out and say that's probably never the case.
No,
I'm not opposed to it. I've never done it. But if I did do it, it would be the most obvious plant that ever existed.
That's exactly what I would say. Is like, I've never done it, but if I did, I would really want it to be like, well, what if we did this thing? And just make it super like shticky.
Yeah.
And make it very clear that this is not like just some, perhaps, like, I don't want the audience to wonder if it's an audience plant. I want, if there's a plant in the audience, I want the audience to know.
Yeah.
That's part of the show.
So another question from Twitch right now has to do with the production value of the show. What I want to just throw out there is, do you always favor shows with higher production value? versus the lower production value? And do you have a favorite one that you can mention to us?
I would say Hideout does a ton of production value on their shows as far as like costumes and different sets and stuff. Every time you guys do a run of something, there's a different set design.
Yeah.
It's probably a little different now, but like, in general.
For our Saturday 8 p.m., like we call it main stage shows, and for our student main stages, as much production value as we can pack in, we love. And often that translates to is a set design, often painted by Casey Beeler, costumes for that make sense for the performers, and a tech crew that is at the top of their craft and like changing lights and maybe sometimes ordering custom lights and sound and whatever crew we need backstage to make things happen, like makeup or whatever. I'm trying to think of a great one extreme example was that Chekhov show that John Bolden directed years ago called Nothing and Everything. And he was like, we're not going to mime anything. We need a fully realized set. And since Chekhov stuff, it was like, basically we needed to look like an old Russian house with fancy furniture and like a tea, I don't know what the word is, fancy word for a silver tea set and like a broom. And he's like, and if it's not one of those things, you don't have it on stage, basically. So it looked incredible. And within that world, they still felt free to improvise, even though it was like a very limited time period set and set of characters. Yeah.
Yeah, even if it's the same set, you can improvise different shows within it every night. So yeah, I like that. Our shows have run a little bit of a gamut. We haven't done too many of them because we're only 3 years old, but in the ones that we have done, they've run a little bit of a gamut in that, Camp Slaughter, all of the characters were wearing short shorts and knee socks and like a matching camp shirt in different colors to give the idea that like, yes, we planned this. Yes, everybody knows we're in a 1980s horror camp movie. But nobody was backstage like, whoever the bad guy is tonight, I'm the bad, like I will become that creature or whatever. None of that's pre-assigned or predetermined, so that everybody's wearing sort of a matching blank slate, I guess, so that they can take on whatever role they need to within that. Mm-hmm. So there's a sort of a mid-production value of like, yes, we've very clearly attempted to make everybody in that same sort of feel without giving everybody like specific roles within the show. And then something like the Trial Before Christmas, which was the Christmas show that Clint produced, that one was one where we knew in advance who was Cindy Lou Who and how to dress her and what the Grinch was wearing and what Ebenezer Scrooge was going to present against the Grinch. And we knew a lot of those things in advance, so we were able to plan for it more. I think I generally tend toward a little bit more of the openness. Trial Before Christmas being a huge production exception where we spent a ton of money on props and costumes just because we wanted to really get those characters right and really put Oogie Boogie in the best burlap sack we could afford. Can I
just say that I admire anyone who can improvise a courtroom in any fashion. Anytime I'm in a courtroom scene, I forget how the legal process works.
We had a lawyer on our crew.
Amazing. I'm like, I've never heard of a jury. I think people just argue with each other and then the judge makes a decision.
We made the audience the jury, essentially. So all points were presented to the audience jury. And we had, we knew that evidence was going to be presented. We didn't know what evidence necessarily was always going to come out. And then the bailiff, which was Rick, would talk to the jury and decide on a verdict that somebody would announce. And that one was it was such a trip and so different than anything else we've produced because it was so much more of a production value attached to it, costume and set wise. And I think the audience really responded to that in a certain way. I think if we were to do something like that over again, Clint and I already talked about several ways we sort of tweak it to make it a little bit more improvised and a little less produced, because I think we did verge on overproduction on that one.
So I have a few more thoughts on production value that have occurred to me. Let me see if I can remember both of them. One is for my 4-person group, PGraph, we'll often do runs of genre shows, especially in the past when we weren't so busy running the theater, basically, we would work up our own genre stuff. And one thing that was interesting that we found is that we could dress in highly specific costumes for like French farce with like the women in the group wearing dresses, and we all had these white makeup on, and I might be wearing a suit and Kareem might be wearing a vest. But then it was still totally fine to turn around and play other types of characters. Like Casey or Valerie might play like a gruff, older, lecherous man in the French farce. And they're still like decked out in these like long, very specific dresses, you know? And it was like the costumes just kind of evoked the mood, even though they were portraying one thing. And that was genuinely a surprise. And we wouldn't have ever thought that was the case unless we had just kind of found ourselves doing it. And the other thing about production value is that sometimes I think it's less important that like, I'm like, oh, this show has a high production value and we're going to have amazing lights and amazing costumes and an amazing set, versus that someone has sat down and thought about all those things and made a firm decision on them. Because there's a big difference, just to give like a really simple example, between like people running around manically on stage and people who have decided as an ensemble that they're going to run around manically on stage.
Yes.
And it looks like night and day, because one, it's just like, oh, they don't know what they're doing and they have no clear body space awareness. And the other is like they are creating this frenetic energy in the room, and it's cool to watch. So for like Death by Musical, we just wore all blacks and like flannel shirts for the main characters for that night. But that was a decision we made versus people just showing up in whatever, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's something to be said really for like the kind of outward appearance that your show puts forward as far as what the audience knows to expect. Is that, you know, we even labels, we were talking pre-show about how labels of a show sort of matter, is that our Christmas show ended up being a little bit more sketch prov than it was strictly improvised. Is like there were a lot of things predetermined, you know, who was on trial and who the witnesses were going to be and that kind of stuff. But in the event that labels matter, you know, that was sketch prov. That was, a lot of it was improvised. All the dialogue was improvised. Nothing was scripted. But there was a lot that we had predetermined before the audience arrived. What are you laughing at, Clint? I need to know.
I just need to know how much time we have left, right?
We don't have a lot of time left, but Clint, I wanted to ask you something. So since you're one of the newbie improvisers here on this panel, but you began producing very early in your improv career, for any improviser who hasn't done that yet, who hasn't experimented with producing a show, what do you find fun about it?
Improv is, okay, here's my thought, is improv is not creativity, because creativity requires thought and time to mull over ideas on the improv stage. You don't have time to do that. What you're doing is reacting. So that's not creative. That is just what is at your core. What's creative is bringing different ideas together. And so there's creativity on the improv stage because different people are bringing their core ideas together, and then you're fusing those ideas. And that's what creativity is. If you want to be creative by yourself in improv, then that's what producing a show is for, because then you have time to bring different ideas together. I'm
not positive I agree with your core idea, but I like what you just said about it afterwards. Yeah, I love that. I love conceptualizing something and saying, you know, here's something I'm really excited about. I wonder who else would be excited about this idea. And I've done that, you know, at this point for freaking years now. And turns out that if I'm really passionate about some topic or genre or theme or something, that likely there's a group of people who will also be excited about that. I think sometimes that's very appealing to an audience. So I think there's a marketability aspect of it. That's, you know, people I find are more likely to go to an improvised horror movie than an improvised we'll see what happens kind of show.
Yeah.
Even if the improvised we'll see what happens kind of show is arguably more quality or, you know, more experienced improvisers doing it, that people find there's an approachability to doing like an improvised show format where they're like, oh, I'm familiar with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'll go to an improvised Buffy show because I like the source material. I like the base of it. Or I'm a big fan of The Grinch, so I'd like to see The Grinch on trial.
Sure.
That those shows are a little bit more approachable to Joe audience member. So I like that as not just as an owner, but as somebody who performs on stages. I like a full audience. I like an audience who's already on board with the concept you're going to do before you even do it.
Yes.
So there's a very friendly audience that goes along with any of these themed sort of shows. But the other aspect of it that I really love is creating sort of that handbook, sort of that the rules, the guidelines, the tropes, identifying what characters we want to see and what, you know, time period we're in, and like what are the influences from the outside. And I like the rehearsal process of it. I like the show and the exploration of it. I like all kinds of aspects of it that are very different from just being, you know, an Armando team or a group who takes a suggestion and goes for 30 minutes. I like both. But I really like the challenge of operating within that sense of rules and creating a story that exists within a world that we've predetermined in some way.
There's
I love
that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
No,
There's a great side effect of doing these highly specific shows too, which is that whatever skills you work on, they don't just go away. They bleed into your everyday improv as well, in the best way possible. It just expands what your toolkit is capable of. Like for instance, PGraph, one of our earliest shows was doing villainy, which was a story about a villain. And we were really bad at playing bad people, which is why we did the show. And then after that, we were pretty good at playing bad people, you know, and that we never would have gotten to that point unless we had hadn't done that show as a very distilled concept of what we wanted to go for.
Thank you so much for that, guys. It is time to end our show.
I know.
Roy, I told you it would go by so fast.
Too fast.
Oh, there's the hat.
It's thematic. Don't you do it.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Yeah, hey, use the tech that you have. I think this is fantastic. Hey, we're talking about production value, so this is a perfect example right here.
Yeah,
guys, thank you for joining me.
Production value.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So good.
Clint, Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your experience. I appreciate it. You're always a fun guest to have on the show. Roy, first-time panel member, I certainly hope to have you on the show again.
I love talking shop. I'd be glad to.
Yeah,
wonderful.
I'm going to spam your Twitch chat now with a bunch of links, so enjoy.
Yeah, I was going to say, there are so many, the Twitch chat erupted with questions, so some of the questions that we weren't able to address in the show, I'd like to hit you back individually.
Absolutely. Stuff. And yeah, there were tons of questions towards the end. There was a little bit of a campaign to get me to stall for time. Tina, thank you so much for being on this show. Thank you for producing this show. Let's see. I want to plug next week's shows. I don't know. We don't know I don't have the names yet of them, but we're going to be doing shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday like we always do. So join us at the same time and the same channel.
On Monday, we're going to do acting.
That's right. Monday is
acting. We knew that one.
Yes, that's what we have already on the books. Mm-hmm. And we also have another show for you guys tonight at, Tina, what time?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock tonight is Tic-Tac-Toe. Please join us. If you didn't get your fill of improv with this discussion, join us at 8 o'clock on this Twitch channel, and we're going to have an improvised game show. It'll be fantastic for you guys. And on Sunday at 8 o'clock on this same channel, because so many of you guys asked for it, we're going to do a Yes and Ask Me revisit, where we get to take the same panel members, throw in a few other people, and just have that discussion for an hour and a half. And just like,
so long.
Yeah,
we'll talk so long.
Yeah.
All of you who want this show to go longer, we're gonna push that limit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Twitch users, thank you so much for joining us and for those questions. Thank you
absolutely.
So much.
Thank you for your questions. I will address whatever I can after this thread is over, or after this stream.
One thing I want to say about the world right now is that it is a little bit crazy when you leave your front door. Quarantine is hurting small businesses around the country. It's hurting theaters, improv theaters around the country. If you found this interesting, if it piqued your interest, if you're already an improviser, or if you're not an improviser, but you found this fascinating and you want to learn more, do some research, learn about the improv theaters in your community, reach out to them. As soon as they're open, go visit them, bookmark their website. If they have a donate button, hit that donate button. If you're in San Antonio, if you're in Austin at the Hideout, please visit the Hideout, check out their website, find out what they have offering. Roy, you're gonna spam with some links.
Oh yeah, the links are already up. Yeah.
Okay, great, excellent.
They've got a daily drop-in workshop. They've got a book. It's all in there. It's all in the Twitch chat. Check out Hideout
to our actual Twitch channel, so let me.
Oh yeah, and also subscribe to that Twitch channel. Because they're doing shows. Fucking Roy is making us all look bad and producing like 3 shows a day or some shit.
P-Graph's doing 3 shows a week and 1 improv Q&A that lasts about an hour and a half on Wednesdays. We've done 43 shows so far. That's just P-Graph, and then the Hideout is doing our weekly games-based competitive show called Maestro, and Joe Bill's playing in it this.
Oh, that's so fun!
Along with some other amazing improvisers from India and Canada and all sorts of stuff.
That's amazing. That's interesting, and it's incredibly impressive, guys. That's awesome.
It's incredibly impressive.
Yeah. If you're in San Antonio,
what else am I gonna do?
Go to bearstage.com, hit the donate button if you love this. And I think that's it, guys. Again, 8 o'clock tonight.
8 o'clock, tic-tac-toe.
See y'all later.
Bye, guys.